Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in internet shitlords, and Meatball was here not a moment ago, except that I did something awful. I have to say, I had a piece of paper here. I wanted to make a couple of programming notes that I wanted to be sure I wouldn't forget about, and I didn't have a pen. I looked inside a cabinet, and there's I don't know if it's a permanent or a non-permanent marker, and the second I popped that cap off, she just recoiled and looked horrified, like she was smelling something she hated, and then she dashed away. I don't think I've opened that marker since she was born, So I had no way of knowing that she would react that way. But it was very funny. I wish I'd been able to catch that on camera. That would have made an excellent short. Anyways, I don't know if we'll see her today in this video. First, then, a couple of programming notes. This Sunday will be the newest episode of Inappropriate Characters, which will be guest starring, and I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting conversation, both about himself and of current events, let's say, Alexander Macris of Adventure Conquer King System. He has just finished a Kickstarter for the new edition of Axe, as we know it, and very wisely chose to wait until it was finished before he came on to our show so that he wouldn't get boycotted for being on our show. I think that was it. No, actually, he was going to be there 4 weeks ago, just before the Kickstarter finished, but we had a problem with the timing, and so he couldn't make it to that one. But he's making it to this one, so stay tuned on Sunday. Mark your calendars. Keep your evening free for Alexander Macris joining the Inappropriate Characters. All right. And at that meeting, we're probably going to be talking about at least some of the subjects I've been talking about lately that I've been just touching on. Before anything else, let me say, first of all, regarding my last video, I managed to get two things wrong in the last video. Or not wrong, but that I didn't include correctly. Well, one thing was directly wrong. So the thing I didn't include to note, which was, I think, important, is that Nura Rose, the one that was accused of plagiarism and where it's pretty damn obvious that they did plagiarize in the woke SR, has since shut down, deleted their personal and their business Twitter account. So I think that pretty much says it all for that subject. The thing I got directly wrong, though it was for lack of information, was that I said in the last video that Wizards of the Coast did not have any of the firings that had just been announced for Hasbro, and I was wrong about that. It literally a little while after the video was done recording, I had gotten confirmation that there were some people from Wizards. There's actually not a ton, but there's quite a few. And it's very telling who it is that they put on there, right? And one of the most notable ones was Mike Merles. Now, we're almost certainly going to be talking a lot about the Wizards firings, or the Hasbro in general, on Sunday. So I don't want to just, give out too many spoilers about this. But I will say that I found it really, really notable. I commented on this on Twitter already, that the people that were fired were the last remaining people with any kind of actual technical competence or skill. Pretty much the last ones. Including in those was Mike Merles, And the people that they kept on were people with no discernible abilities of any kind, and people who basically aren't gamers, who haven't been gaming for a very long time at all. Some of them were only started gaming when they got hired to do these projects. Most of them come from backgrounds that have nothing to do with gaming. So Ajit George and Mackenzie DeArmas are still around, but Mike Merles is gone. Now, that you might say, oh, well, but so what, right? And besides the fact that it seems as though the diversity hires are the ones being kept on, whereas the people that actually do the work are being fired, aside from that that kind of accusation. There's the very, very practical question of the money. Yeah. So Hasbro supposedly is doing these firings in order to help save the business. They've lost half their money in 5 years. And they no doubt were meaning to, like, I mean, if you're a business, you've lost half your value and you've got way too many employees, you are going to want to fire a bunch of employees as a cost-cutting measure, but also to trim down the operation. And what you want to do is keep all the best people, right? The ones that are actually, you need to figure out who's doing work, who's not, who's making money, who's not. The people who aren't doing work and aren't making money are the ones you fire. Everybody else you keep. And here they've done almost exactly the opposite. Mike Mearls, I know that a lot of you don't like Mike Mearls for various reasons. I know that he said things while he was in charge of D&D that were very clearly on the woke bandwagon and very clearly insulting to most gamers. And you cannot like him all you like, right? I'm not asking you to like him. I'm asking you to acknowledge a couple of facts about Mike Mearls, right? The cold hard fact is that Mike Mearls took over D&D and created, with some help, the most successful edition of D&D that Wizards of the Coast ever had by a long shot. Then, after a bunch of ridiculous attacks against him from the woke crowd that saw him as their enemy because he stood up to them in Consultant Gate, because of that, they hounded him in Wizards of the Coast until it became necessary for him to leave the Dungeons and Dragons department. He went over to Baldur's Gate 3 and helped create the franchise that has now saved this quarter for Hasbro, right? It's one of the only things that made money. And then he went over to Magic and did these collector editions of Magic stuff. I don't know a lot about it, right? But apparently he made with Wizards $100 million in Magic, right? So this is a guy who's literally made billions of dollars for Hasbro. And then you have Ajit George, who produced the least successful D&D adventure compendium in history, right? And Mackenzie the Armas, who is very clearly on the road to produce a disastrous deluxe box set that no one is going to want because it basically is an insult to the history of the Deck of Many Things. It rewrites history, and it presents Mackenzie the Armas's autistic lesbian paladin as the superhero creator of the Deck of Many Things as a complete self-insert. Okay? These people are hemorrhaging money, but they're the ones that got kept, right? And I have to say, now there's like almost no one left, right? There's Jeremy Crawford, who's a vegetable, and there's, a whole bunch of these diversity hires who have almost no experience in D&D. And all I have to say about this before I go on to the other half of my topic for today is I told you so. If you look back at my earlier videos, early on in my channel, I had talked about this with people and I had warned people because there are a whole bunch of people in the OSR that despise Mike Mearls. I understand why. I totally get you. And we're like praying for the day he would be gone, right? And I said, well, hang on. Because right now, Mike Mearls is the guy that's put his thumb inside the leaking dam. He's the only thing stopping the full wokeification of D&D. And they're like, oh, but it's all woke now. No, it's not. It's not even close to all woke now. This was back when they were like, I think it was before Waterdeep, right? It was before the Waterdeep Pride Parade source book, right? Like Mike Mearls, this was the golden age. 2019 D&D products compared to now, to what the garbage they put out now, look like a masterpiece, right? And I told everyone, he is not. There's a reason why the woke people are trying to take him out. He's very liberal, absolutely, right? He said shit to keep his job, absolutely, right? But he was the one guy that was putting some brakes on the system to say, no, this is still about the game. This is about making a game. This is not about turning it into an ideological propaganda factory. And the second they got him out, that's exactly what happened. As soon as Mike Mearls was not in charge of D&D, that's when D&D went full and complete woke, right? And I told you guys so, okay? So just remember that. All right. So for the second part of this video, I just wanted to share with you guys, because I've had people ask about like my campaigns, and I wanted to share with you guys about my most recent, I believe, it's my most recent campaign, relatively speaking, which is Baptism of Fire, because that's a product that I don't have out yet. And I thought you'd find it interesting to know what kind of game you can play in Baptism of Fire. Well, the answer is actually that you can play almost anything similar to Dark Albion, right? Like if you want to, you can be a group of adventurers out to find your fortune in the kind of D&D style, just in a much more medieval, authentic world. If you want to, you can be agents of the crown or the church, right? And that you're going out on missions for either of those two in order to promote the furtherance of civilization, right? If you want, you can have a game of court intrigue inside the PS court, which certainly has had some of its intrigues, right? And there was always this kind of struggle going on. It wasn't so much about, except at 1 or 2 points, it wasn't so much about the internal family squabbles as it was with Poland always, the squabbles between the king and the magnates, the highest level nobles, where there was always this struggle about who would have more power over each other. But that makes for some good intrigue stuff. You can do war stuff, right? There's going to be rules on mass combat and domains. So you can play any variety of things that you would play in most fantasy settings. But there are elements of the particular flavor of Baptism of Fire being set at the very beginning of the Polish state when it was Christianized, that make it very particular. I'm going to tell you about what my campaign is like. So in the standard Baptism of Fire book, I've set it so that the default starting period in the timeline, and I mean, in my games, I always make timelines. I did in Dark Albion and everything, and I have a suggested starting date, let's say. You can obviously pick to start earlier or later in any case, right? I mean, you certainly can do that in Albion. You'll be able to do that in Baptism of Fire. And in Baptism of Fire, I set it like a relatively late starting date, 1025. The timeline itself goes from the 960s, which is when the first chief of the Polands converts to Christianity. And that is actually the date that most modern Poles consider the founding of Poland as a nation, not the date of the coronation of the first king, which is what happens in 1025. It's rather the baptism of the first chief of the Polands to Christianity, because that's the baptism of Poland. That's the moment that it changes from being a bunch of tribes of pagan heathen Slavs and turns into a Christian nation of Poland, right? So I didn't set it back then, though. I set it in 991, kind of the halfway mark between those two, which is near the end of the rule of that first chief, Mieszko, and just before, the potential conflict that arises in regards to his inheritance, because he has too many sons and from different mothers. So there's a bit of Game of Thronesy sort of stuff that can happen there, And in the campaign, we use the standard character creation system, and we got some very interesting results, right? So we had several people making characters, and not all of them have played yet, okay? But there were people who wanted to make the characters, and we'll see about introducing them later on. But the main party at this time, and for this last period of time, has been it's consisted of a group that I think it's really interesting how they meet a lot of the kind of tropes of like Polish literature, because there is without a doubt one character that turned out better statistically than everybody else, and he turned out to be of a certain social class, and the player decided to play the character in a certain way that makes him like your stereotypical Polish protagonist, right? He's this guy who is what you call a boot noble, right? There was aristocrats in Poland, and they had a wide variety of range among the aristocrats, the szlachta, of power and wealth. And kind of the lowest level of that nobility was what was nicknamed a boot noble, because he owns no land. the only thing he owns below his feet is his boots. Okay, and boot nobles are often protagonists of the kind of literary tradition of Poland, in historical stories and things like that, because they're forced to go out and seek their fortune, right? But they're also of noble blood and therefore have the higher, more refined qualities, and so they're often these kind of heroic characters that are very virtuous, look to do good, but also are in some ways less bound to convention than they would be if they were landed nobles, And the player character is playing this guy is doing it exactly that way. He's also decided to take up, because he wasn't able to get land, he didn't become a knight or anything like that, a lord, right? He has decided to take the path of the witch hunter. So he's of the witch hunter class. And then he ends up having a stalwart companion who's a woodsman, who's like this very folksy peasant kind of guy. He's a woodsman. He's a folksy, I should say, he's a folksy rustic kind of guy, because he's actually from the class of the warrior class that was at this time what would later become knights, right? They didn't call themselves really knights at this time, but they were he's basically the sworn man of the witch hunter and follows him around, and then you have the third character is a holy man, but he's a very unconventional holy man. He's a guy who is a very young guy. He's only in his late teens, and he was the son of a bricklayer. He's got a widowed mom, and at one moment he was hit on the head with a bucket in a construction job and had a vision of St. John the Baptist telling him, you're following the path of your earthly father, but now go forth and follow the path of your Father in heaven and convert the pagans, And so he had this vision. He didn't know what to think about it, right? And so he goes to see the greatest holy knight of this time period. This guy, he was actually called Gerald, right? Which is, I think, the name of the Witcher, right? But he was a holy warrior, right? This is a real person. This is a guy who was the number one bannerman, you could say, of Mieszko, of the chief of the Polish. And when Mieszko converts to Christianity, at first Gerald is horrified and is strictly and strongly opposed to it. But then Mieszko insists, he makes an obligation of loyalty to Gerald, that because Gerald had sworn him obedience, he obliges Gerald to join Mieszko in going to Rome. This is a real story, right? And going to Rome. And when Gerald goes to Rome, he has this spiritual experience, right? This kind of road to Damascus moment in Rome of suddenly being overwhelmed with the wondrousness of God. And he converts on the spot. He becomes a Christian. Then after that, when they go back to Poland, he becomes the most ferocious fighter for Christianity, right? Like he's the one that is front line on opposing any of the heathens that dare to not convert, And so the player character, holy man, goes to Gerald. Gerald says, I'm going to pray on it, right? And he goes and prays, and then at the same time, you've got the noble and his bannerman that have come to the court because it's the birthday of Mieszko, of the chief, and because the noble is trying to find contacts and opportunities that will allow him to further his chosen profession. And during the events of the court, Gerald is introduced to this noble. The noble is from a clan. All the nobles have banners, right? And the banner of this noble is Abdank, it's called. And that's from down in Krakow. And it's a very respectable house. He's from a very respectable house where at the court, he meets other people from his own extended clan, from his own house that are much wealthier than him and extremely well connected, right? It's just he comes from a very poor branch of that family. And so he gets introduced to Gerald. Gerald sees him. And then Gerald kind of puts two and two together and says, all right, I don't know if this guy's a holy man or not, but he will travel with you. You're a witch hunter. Go forth and try to do good works and try to face evil, right, and to convert the heathen and oppose darkness. And time will tell if you are a true holy man or if your vision was just a delusion. And so they all say, okay, and then they head off. And then a little bit later, they end up meeting another couple of characters who got introduced a little bit later in the storyline. I mean, but during this time that they were in the capital and in the court, there was quite a few other things that happened, right? The later holy man was originally like a pit fighter. He was like not a pit fighter, a brawler, like he participated in fights for money in the common areas of the capital. And they also had some wacky dealings in the market and lots of other things. I'm skipping over a few things because I don't want this video to go too long. But along their travels, after they leave the capital, they run into another couple of guys, one of whom is this one is a peasant warrior who's this very simple, rustic kind of guy, right? He is very plain speaking, and he basically left his own territory looking for someone because he wants to be the right-hand man of some powerful lord, right? And he knew he would never do that in his home territory where the nobility already had armies, right? So he decided on a plan to find some poor noble that he thought had potential and follow him around. And that's what he starts to do. And then later, they get rumor about a town called Mogilno, a village really called Mogilno, that is near a swamp. And then in the swampland, there are pagans who have hidden out and are in rebellion against the Christianization of this territory. And there's also been rumors that a small dragon has been sighted in the swamp. And insanely, they decide to go, and their plan is to possibly kill a dragon. So they travel over to this little town. And when they get there, they run into another boot noble. And this guy, he's actually playing it's a thief character. He's like the other guy in Impoverished Noble, but he's like the flip side of him, right? He's, if the first guy is, I don't know, Jon Snow, then the second one is Littlefinger, right? Like this guy is, he's a scheming noble who is, he's looking to accomplish a lot of things. But one of the things that he's never openly stated in character, but that it's very clear out of character, is that he's the third son, I think, of the family, and he's looking to basically kill his brothers in order to get the inheritance, which is one of the most appalling, unimaginably vile things that you could do, right? Like in the ancient world, like the medieval world, rather, I should say, there were very few rules that were so absolute that every pagan and every Christian knew them, right? Like this is just core things, right? You cannot betray your lord that you have sworn an oath to, right? More than that, you cannot betray hospitality that you have granted or that was granted to you, right? What that means is if you're invited into someone's home under hospitality, then you are not allowed to attack them or kill them or rob them. You're not allowed to do anything bad while you're in there. And they're not allowed to do anything bad to you. And that is it's a sacred standard, more so even than the loyalty to your own lord. And then the third rule above everything else is you never go against the family, right? Not ever, right? You never kill, hurt, deceive, or in some other way cause injury to anybody of your own family. And that's especially the nuclear family, but also the extended family, right? There's an understanding of loyalty and support, just like the guy from the clan Abdank, when he got to the court of Mieszko, he met a guy from the clan Abdank that he'd never met before, and that guy introduced him to the people because they're from the same clan, right? That's just how it works. So for this other character to have the intention, however secret, of murdering his entire family just to get power, right, tells you what a horrific villain he is, right? And there's often, that's kind of one of the tropes also in a lot of like Polish historical literature and stuff, where you have like there's the good noble and then there's the bad noble, right? There's the one that wants to do everything right, and there's the one that ends up probably causing the Swedish to invade or something like that, So it's, this is turned out to be by a sheer, again, nobody's picking out the class. Well, they're picking out classes, but they're not picking out any other details of the characters because you're doing the same generation system as in Lion and Dragon, right? You don't get to decide what social status you have unless the DM wants you to. But I mean, the default rules as written, if you would, is that you roll for your social class. All of your stats are rolled. Everything, your background is rolled. Your background history is rolled. So these guys go on. They go into this village. They go into the swamp after the people of the village describe what they claim is a very small kind of fat dragon. And they go into the swamp and have quite a few troubling encounters, including with a group of these pagans, right? And so what you have to understand is in Poland at this time, paganism was in some places, especially the main territories, it had been forbidden, right? Like in the cities, everybody was expected to convert. And of course, there were some people who secretly kind of just gave a false conversion, right? But you were generally expected to convert. Now, in the countryside, you had a lot of people that didn't convert because nobody had gotten around to that yet, right? And of course, the people that did convert were very often just giving the slightest of lip service to that while continuing in their pagan ways. But in some places, there were some places, especially in smaller towns or rural regions, where pagans and Christians kind of coexisted quite peacefully. But there were other places, especially like in Pomerania and the east of Masovia, where there was terrible violence that the pagans were instituting against the Christians, and then waves of violence that the Christians instituted against the pagans in this process. But here, anyways, what had happened was that the people of this village and the surrounding farmlands had been told, you got to convert. And a whole bunch of them converted, but a minority of them refused to betray their gods and went in deep into this large swamp and set up a community there in isolation, and they haven't been attacking very much except for some banditry people on the outside, but anyone who goes in there is in a lot of trouble, especially if you're trying to convert people. And in this encounter that they had, it looked almost certain that it was just going to devolve into a battle, and it was even odds, right? But then the holy man just started talking, and he started saying, he started asking them things. He started telling them things. And it was very interesting because he was trying to find common ground with them. He didn't talk to them directly first about I'm here to convert you, right? He said, no, I'm here to help you because there's this creature that you have in the swamp and we want to kill it, right? And I'm sure that you have reason to worry about it. All this. And it worked out that he defused the battle, right? At the end, the guy said, first of all, they explained that it's not a dragon, it's a giant toad, right? It's this giant toad that is quite fearsome. And they said, well, you go off and fight it then, because then it'll do our job for us. Why risk ourselves, in fighting you? The toad will kill you all. And so they use that as an excuse to de-escalate and not get into the fight. I thought that was very clever. And so then they go and they fight. They eventually find the giant toad. They actually beat it quite handily, in part because the toad had a terrible cascading series of failed morale checks. And then they start heading on back. They travel back. They make their way to the capital again, where they try to get back in contact with Geralt, and they manage that, and he says, well, okay, great, but I mean, this isn't enough, here's the deal. You guys go off, do something productive until next Easter, right? And then come back to me and tell me on how things went, right? And then I'll see if I can put you somewhere or do something with you, right? And so they're going to have to continue on their quest. This is their first great quest, and they did it, and it turned out pretty good, but they've got more roads to go yet, right? And so they're now looking at other possibilities, including that there's a village in the far western end of Greater Poland, where it's said that that's surrounded by forest, right? And there's where this is one of these areas where the pagans and the Christians kind of coexist. And it's been said that in this forest there was spotted a rare firebird that is an extremely unusual and valuable creature. So I think they're going to go hunting. I think so far they're in the stage of kind of hunting monsters, right? And there's been, again, there's a lot of other stuff that happened over I've really summarized this so as not to get too high over the half hour. But that's basically what the campaign is like, right? So as you can see, in some parts it's not much different than standard D&D, but with a much more medieval bent to it. It's set in actual PS Poland, but Poland as they thought of it, with like magic being the way they thought magic worked, monsters being the type of creatures they thought existed, right? That sort of thing. And, the adventures are going to have stronger elements of social role-playing and of travel and discovery of places, the kind of the picaresque theme, similar to what you see potentially in Dark Albion, potentially in Sword and Caravan. Because it's something I quite like in my games. But, again, you don't have to do that. You can always run a game where your guys are based mostly in one place and are doing things on a mission-by-mission basis or something. But yeah, this has been, so far it's been an excellent campaign. I just thought it was very funny how the dice knew in terms of like putting everybody's character into place in a way that would fit all of these kind of thematics. Because if you didn't know better, you'd think this was written in a kind of novelistic style, right? That was all pre-planned, but it wasn't. It was just a product of the roll of the dice. I thought that was very cool. So I guess that's everything. If you have questions about Baptism Fire, ask me. And in the meantime, don't forget to check out the Red Room's Webstore. The link is going to be in the description. I have just come out with issue 1 of the Pundit Files, which is a 13-page book. Issue 1 which is called Tables to Shake Up Your Campaign. It's a set of random tables of setting-altering events, right? Big-scale events that you could use in your campaign. And it's only $3.50. Okay, so you got nothing to lose. So while you're there, check out all of the great products that Red Room has also, because they've got a lot of them. So go check out the Red Room store and check out all my other products. If you're looking for more stuff like the Pundit Files so far, you can go to DTRPG and check out the RPG Pundit Presents series. There's 109 episodes of it, issues now of it there. And if not, you can check out my books, Dark Albion, the Old School Companion 2, which has 25 or 26, I always forget, Medieval Authentic Adventures, Wilderlands, which is a source book for Sword and Caravan for random wilderness encounters, and Family Generation. Anyways, so check out all of my products. All the links are in the description. Thank you so much to everyone who's always been supporting me thus far. And if you don't have a dime to your name, you can still like the video, you can still subscribe, and you can share this video anywhere you think people will find it interesting or anywhere that you think it might piss people off, okay? So that's everything for today. Currently smoking Lorenzetti egg plus Argento roots.